What does tradition mean to you? The United States takes tradition very seriously. From baseball to the 4th of July, it's an important part of our culture. The Indianapolis 500 is one great U.S. tradition. It involves 700 horsepower open-wheel race cars on a 2.5-mile oval in a huge stadium filled with dedicated fans. It's the ultimate racing experience that people come from all over the world to see. It's so beloved it's been stretched out into a whole month of events. The history and evolution of the event are extremely interesting. To fully understand, we must start at the beginning. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway, according to Car and Driver, was built as a testing facility that would also double as a racetrack with hopes that U.S. car manufacturers could catch up to European car manufacturers. According to History.com, there were 40 cars in the first 500 in 1911. Ray Herron won. The average speed was around 75 miles per hour, and it took almost 7 hours to complete. There were roughly 90,000 in attendance, according to Smithsonian Magazine. The car that won, the Marmon Wasp, was the first with a rear-view mirror that was installed because they normally had passengers that would tell them when the cars were coming, but they wanted the cars to be lighter, so they did away with the extra person and replaced them with a mirror. By 1922, all the cars were smaller, lighter, and faster. By 1930, they had changed so much that it had become a spectacle of the finest cars in the world. Famous people attended each year. The race has changed as well as the cars. The crowd used to use a device and manually change the pegs in order to try to keep up with who was in what place. Now, there are giant screens everywhere that tell you in real time, down to hundredths of a second, who's in what place. The technology was basic back then. The cars were so dangerous, it was common for people to die in crashes. Sam Dickinson lost his life in the first 500 in 1911. A lot has changed since the first, but it didn't happen overnight. There's always been qualifying for the first 500. But for the first one, you just had to maintain a speed of 75 miles per hour down the front straightaway. Now the process takes an entire week of May. The drivers have several sessions where they try to compete for the best speed over and over again. That's just one way the race has evolved. Tickets for the first race were $1. Now they start at around $50 and they go up to $6,700. 90,000 were in attendance in 1911, and there were 220,000 last year, according to VanderbiltCupRaces.com. The car that won the first 500 had about 110 horsepower. Like I said, it took 7 hours, and the average speed was about 75 miles per hour. Now the race takes only 2.5 to 3 hours. The average speeds are over 200 miles per hour, and the cars have about 700 horsepower. The cars also look completely different. The only similarity is that they're still open wheel. Several different car companies have competed over time. Now the only ones that compete are Honda and Chevy. Going to an Indy 500, there's nothing quite like it. This is where tradition really comes into play. Some have endured over the years, and those are the ones that have become most important to drivers and to fans. Early in May is the 500 Festival in downtown Indianapolis. It started in 1957, and it's a time where they have marathons, big floats, and the fans and the drivers can come together and celebrate the event. Back Home Again in Indiana is a song that was first sung on the morning of 1946, and since 1972, it's been sung by Jim Nabors. In 1947, they started the tradition of releasing the balloons. There's thousands released every year. It's different colors, and the kids really love this tradition. Other well-known traditions include drinking the milk when you win, kissing the bricks along the finish line, and getting your face, if you win, added to the Borg-Warner Trophy, which is valued at over $1 million. And what would a famous historic event be without a couple of fun facts? According to Car and Driver, only 3 of all the competitors in the first 500 still exist. That's Buick, Fiat, and Mercedes. The first European winner, Jules Go, chugged champagne at each of his 6 pit stops in 1913, and he won, but the next year no alcohol rule was implemented for the drivers. In 1917, There was no Indy 500 because of World War I. Instead, the facility was used for aviation repair. It wasn't until 1977 that a car reached over 200 miles per hour, and this was a Ford. And this Ford actually qualified on the pole first, but came in second to four-time winner A.J. Foyt. Only 3 drivers have won the Indy 500 4 times. It's a very elite club. So it's safe to say that Americans deeply value tradition. The Indy 500 is a huge tradition, celebrated not just by Americans, but by the whole world. Winning a 500 for a driver is like winning a Super Bowl for a pro football player. It started in the early 1900s as a testing facility for U.S. car companies, and it turned into the greatest racing spectacle in the world, with over 200,000 in attendance each year. Traditions that occur in the month of May and on race day are so embedded in racing culture, they're celebrated like a holiday by fans. If you haven't attended, it's really worth going in the future. It's like being a part of history.